2,000 years ago, long before freeways cut through the valleys of Southern California, before helicopters hovered above endless traffic, before the glowing white letters of Hollywood watched over the hills. There was only silence, wind, and the rhythm of the Pacific Ocean. Imagine standing where downtown Los Angeles now rises in steel and glass. No skyscrapers, no neon, no engines, only wetlands, oak forests, mountain lions moving through tall grass, and smoke from distant village fires curling into the evening sky. This land belonged to the Tongva people, master navigators, traders, and builders whose civilization flourished here for centuries. They called the region Tovangar, the world. Their villages stretched from the coast to the valleys, connected by trails that would, thousands of years later, become the outlines of modern roads. And this is where our time lapse truly begins. Because Los Angeles was never simply built. It was layered, one civilization over another, one dream replacing the previous dream, every generation believing it had discovered paradise for the first time. I always find it fascinating that modern Los Angeles, a city famous for artificiality, began as one of the most naturally abundant regions in North America. Rivers flowed freely. Seasonal floods renewed the soil. The coastline shimmered with life. In many ways, the first people here understood balance with the land far better than the metropolis that would later consume it. Then came the sails on the horizon. In 1542, Spanish explorer Juan Rodriguez Cabrillo arrived along the California coast. To Europe, this distant shore looked empty, untouched, waiting to be claimed. But history often ignores those already living in a place. To the Tongva, strangers had simply appeared from the sea. For more than 2 centuries afterward, the region changed slowly. But in 1769, Spanish expeditions and missionaries began moving northward into California, establishing missions, forts, and settlements. Disease followed them. Entire indigenous communities were devastated before they fully understood what was happening. And then came the moment that officially created Los Angeles. In 1781, 44 settlers from New Spain, modern Mexico, founded a small farming pueblo beside the Los Angeles River. Its full name was almost impossibly long: El Pueblo de Nuestra Señora la Reina de los Ángeles, the town of Our Lady, the Queen of Angels. At first, it was little more than dusty streets, adobe homes, livestock, and irrigation ditches called zanjas. Water meant survival. Without the river, the settlement would vanish back into the wilderness. What amazes me is how tiny Los Angeles remained for so long. Today, it dominates global culture. But for decades, it was an isolated outpost at the edge of empires, Spanish, then Mexican, and eventually American. No one standing in that little pueblo could have imagined what this place would become. Not the movie capital of Earth, not a city of 18 million people, not a kingdom of endless lights visible from space. But history loves impossible transformations, and Los Angeles was only getting started. By the middle of the 19th century, Los Angeles was still a rough frontier town. Dust storms swept through narrow streets. Horses outnumbered people. Gambling halls and saloons stayed open through the night, while violence became so common that some travelers described the settlement as one of the most dangerous towns in America. And strangely enough, that lawless energy would become part of the city's DNA. In 1848, everything changed almost overnight. The Mexican-American War ended. California became part of the United States, and just days later, gold was discovered at Sutter's Mill. The California gold rush exploded like wildfire. Hundreds of thousands rushed westward searching for fortune. Most prospectors headed north, but Los Angeles quietly benefited in another way. It became a supply center, a ranching hub, and eventually a strategic gateway for trade. The population surged, cultures collided, and the sleepy pueblo began mutating into an American city. What I find especially interesting is that Los Angeles grew not because it had obvious advantages, but because people kept inventing advantages for it. Unlike New York, it lacked a major natural harbor. Unlike Chicago, it sat far from industrial centers. Even water was limited. Yet dreamers kept arriving anyway. Then came the railroads. In the 1870s and 1880s, competing railway companies connected Southern California to the rest of the United States. Suddenly, crossing the continent no longer required months of brutal travel. Newspapers advertised Los Angeles as a paradise of sunshine, oranges, health, and opportunity. Britannica.com. The marketing was relentless. Pamphlets promised eternal spring. Doctors recommended the climate to tuberculosis patients. Land developers sold fantasies faster than they sold property. And people believed it. Thousands arrived from the cold industrial cities of the East Coast and Midwest. Entire orange groves were planted across the valleys. Elegant Victorian homes appeared beside dusty roads. Electric streetcars spread outward like veins, connecting new suburbs to the growing downtown. This was one of the first great reinventions of Los Angeles, the creation of the California dream. Sunshine became a product. Lifestyle became an industry. Even today, the city still sells that same illusion, the promise that somewhere beyond the traffic, beyond the smog, beyond the impossible rent prices, a better version of life is waiting. But every paradise has a hidden cost. As Los Angeles expanded, the Los Angeles River was increasingly manipulated and redirected. Wetlands disappeared. Indigenous communities were displaced even further. Massive land speculation created corruption and inequality. Water shortages became terrifyingly real. So the city made a decision that still feels almost unbelievable. It went searching for water hundreds of miles away. In the early 1900s, engineer William Mulholland led one of the most ambitious infrastructure projects in American history. The Los Angeles Aqueduct. Water from the Owens Valley was diverted southward to fuel the city's explosive growth. To Los Angeles, it was survival. To Owens Valley farmers, it was theft. The conflict became known as the California Water Wars, a battle of sabotage, dynamite attacks, and political deception. And honestly, this moment reveals the true character of Los Angeles better than any Hollywood movie ever could. The city was willing to reshape entire landscapes to sustain its vision of the future. It refused to stay small, no matter the cost. And just as the aqueduct delivered life into the growing metropolis, another invention arrived that would transform Los Angeles forever: motion pictures. At the beginning of the 20th century, Los Angeles was expanding rapidly, but it was still not the cultural giant we know today. New York dominated finance. Chicago ruled industry. Washington held political power. Los Angeles, meanwhile, was something else entirely, a city still inventing itself. And then Hollywood appeared. Ironically, filmmakers did not originally come to Southern California because they loved the scenery. They came because they were escaping control. In the early 1900s, Thomas Edison aggressively enforced patents connected to motion picture technology on the East Coast. Independent filmmakers fled westward, searching for distance, sunlight, and freedom. Southern California offered all three. The weather allowed year-round filming. Mountains, beaches, deserts, and forests existed within driving distance. And if legal trouble appeared, Mexico was only a few hours away. It almost sounds like the beginning of a crime story, and in some ways it was. By the 1910s, tiny studios were appearing across Hollywood. Within 2 decades, they evolved into colossal empires. Paramount Pictures, Warner Brothers, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, and Universal Pictures. These studios didn't simply produce movies. They manufactured mythology. For the first time in human history, millions of people across the planet could watch the same faces, the same stories, the same fantasies projected onto giant screens. Hollywood turned actors into gods. Entire lifestyles became global obsessions, and Los Angeles became the capital of dreams. I think this is one of the strangest transformations any city has ever experienced. In less than 50 years, a dusty agricultural region evolved into the machine that shaped global imagination itself. People no longer moved to Los Angeles only for land or sunshine. They moved there to become someone else. The famous Hollywood sign appeared in 1923. Originally, it wasn't even meant to last. It was simply an advertisement for a real estate development called Hollywood Land. But somehow that temporary sign became eternal, and maybe that perfectly represents Los Angeles, a city built on illusion that somehow became real. Yet beneath the glamour, another Los Angeles was emerging. Oil fields spread across the basin, factories multiplied. Immigrants from Mexico, Japan, China, the Philippines, and Europe arrived searching for work. Vast neighborhoods expanded outward in every direction. Then came the automobile. Most cities grew upward around trains. Los Angeles grew outward around cars. Developers dismantled many electric rail systems while highways and boulevards consumed the landscape. By the 1930s and 40s, the city was already becoming the sprawling metropolis we recognize today. And this changed something fundamental about human life. In Los Angeles, distance stopped mattering the way it once had. People could live miles apart yet remain connected through roads and automobiles. The city spread across valleys, hills, deserts, and coastline like liquid concrete. But rapid growth also created deep fractures. Segregation intensified. Housing discrimination became systematic. Entire communities were divided by infrastructure projects and unequal policing. The glamorous image exported through cinema hid enormous social tensions underneath. Then came World War II. Factories across Los Angeles shifted into wartime production. Aircraft manufacturing exploded. Companies like Lockheed Martin and Douglas Aircraft Company transformed Southern California into one of the most important industrial regions in America. And after the war ended, millions more arrived. Suburbs expanded endlessly. Freeways multiplied. The American dream now had a physical address, Los Angeles. But the city's brightest decades were also planting the seeds of future chaos. Because beneath the palm trees and movie premieres, pressure was building. And eventually, the illusion would crack. By the second half of the 20th century, Los Angeles had become something unprecedented. A global metropolis without a single center. A city that spread outward instead of upward, outward instead of inward, as if it was trying to escape itself while still growing larger every year. But beneath the sunshine narrative, the contradictions were sharpening. The post-war boom had created prosperity, yet it also deepened inequality. Freeways carved through neighborhoods, often destroying communities that had existed for generations. Suburbs flourished on the edges while inner districts struggled with disinvestment. The same infrastructure that made Los Angeles modern also divided it. And then came the environmental cost. By the 1960s and 70s, the city's air had become infamous, smog so thick it blurred entire skylines. Children were warned not to play outside on certain days. Los Angeles, once marketed as a health paradise, had become a symbol of industrial pollution. I find it almost poetic and tragic that a city built on the idea of pure sunlight spent decades hiding the sun itself behind chemical haze. Yet even in crisis, Los Angeles continued expanding. The entertainment industry evolved into a global empire. Television replaced cinema as the dominant household medium. Studios like Paramount Pictures and Warner Brothers adapted, reshaping storytelling again and again, exporting the city's imagination to every corner of the world. But outside the studio gates, reality was far more unstable. The 1965 Watts Uprising revealed deep racial and economic tensions. Later decades brought cycles of unrest, most dramatically the 1992 Los Angeles riots, when the city erupted after the Rodney King verdict. Entire districts burned, exposing fractures that had long been ignored. And still, Los Angeles did not collapse. It absorbed the shock. It rebuilt. It continued. This is one of the most unusual traits of the city. It does not resolve its contradictions. It layers them. Every crisis becomes part of its structure, like sediment in rock. Then, in 1994, the Northridge earthquake struck. Buildings fell, highways collapsed, and for a moment, the illusion of permanence disappeared entirely. But within years, the infrastructure returned, stronger and more reinforced than before. Los Angeles learned to rebuild itself as a reflex. At the same time, a quieter transformation was underway. Immigration surged again from Latin America and Asia, reshaping the cultural identity of the city. Neighborhoods evolved into multilingual ecosystems. Food, music, and language blended into something uniquely Angelino. Los Angeles stopped being just an American city. It became a global one. By the early 2000s, the skyline had grown again, this time shaped by finance, media, and early digital industries. And soon, a new technological wave arrived. Companies like SpaceX began building rockets not far from the same coastline where ancient Tongva villages once stood. The contrast is almost surreal. Indigenous history, colonial settlement, Hollywood fantasy, and interplanetary ambition all layered in the same geographic space. Few cities compress time like this one. Even nature continues to remind Los Angeles of its fragility. Wildfires grow more intense each decade. Drought cycles return with greater severity. The water systems that once enabled expansion now struggle to sustain it. The same question that haunted William Mulholland still echoes today. How long can this city keep importing its survival? And yet, people keep arriving. They come for film, for tech, for music, for escape, for reinvention. Some come chasing fame. Others simply chase weather. Many come with nothing but the belief that Los Angeles might allow them to become someone new. That belief has never truly disappeared. So when we look at this 2,000-year time lapse, from Tongva villages to global metropolis, what do we actually see? A city? An empire? A dream factory? Or something more unstable than all of those definitions? I would argue Los Angeles is not a finished place. It is an ongoing experiment in scale, ambition, and contradiction. A city that repeatedly destroys and rebuilds its own identity without ever settling on a final form. And maybe that is the real ending of this story. Or the reason there is no ending at all. Because Los Angeles was never meant to be complete. it was meant to keep becoming.